Hi, Keith here from Academy of Bass. This is the first lesson of 2021, so Happy New Year. The last lesson that I did was a lesson on the minor pentatonic scale. If you haven't seen that already, I'll post a link to it below. Go and check it out. The response to that lesson has been absolutely phenomenal, and I've received so many messages asking if I can do something similar. So here it is, because today I'm going to be giving exactly the same treatment to the major pentatonic scale. Now, I have done a lesson on the major pentatonic scale before, so I'll post a link to that below too. In fact, it was the very first lesson that I ever released, and a lesson aimed at giving beginner bass players a starting point of how to play great bass lines. But today I'm going to take this to the next level and show you just how potent this scale is and how to get the most out of it. So the major pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm playing in the key of G, so the notes are G, A, B, D and E, or root, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 6th, and of course I can take it to G the octave. Now I'm also going to play this up an octave starting at the 10th fret of the A string, G, A, B, D, E and G. What I also like to do where possible is extend the range of what I'm playing. So when we get to G the octave, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to play A the 2nd and B the 3rd. And coming down, when we get to G the root note, I'm going to play open E. And all I've done there is squeeze the maximum potential possible out of the scale in terms of the available notes to us in that position. And we can do the same up here. So when we get to G the root note, we can come down, so we're playing D the 5th and E the 6th. Now that's a great scale pattern for taking us across the strings, but there's a second scale pattern that brings us up the neck, and it's this. So it's G, A, B, D, E. Now the fingering's important too. First finger, fourth finger, fourth finger, first finger, fourth finger. And we can play this up an octave too. Now, if we repeat that scale pattern starting from G here, we get a 2-octave scale. Now, the other thing that I'll say about this fingering is that it changes when we play the scale ascending and descending. So when we ascend the scale, we lead with our little finger. And when we come down the scale, we lead with our first finger. Now, you can break this scale down into a series of other patterns too that will help you learn the scale across the neck, but I prefer a much more simple approach, certainly at the start. And with just these 2 scale patterns, we've got the entire neck covered now. So what I'm going to do now is start looking at how we get the most out of this scale. I'm going to start by breaking the scale down into 3-note fragments. So starting from the root note, we've got G, A, B, or root 2nd and 3rd. We can also play that here or up here. And using the 2nd scale fingering, we've got or. And that's before we start turning it on its head and playing things like, all I'm playing there is G the root, A the 2nd and B the 3rd, G the root, A the 2nd and B the 3rd. And we've also got and. That gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 variations from this one 3-note fragment. So you can see that we're going to have tons and tons of options that we can use in our bass playing. So I'm going to move on now to the next note, because the next fragment starts from A. So we've got A, B and D, or 2, 3 and 5. We can play that here, or, and using the 2nd scale fingering. And moving on again, we get B, D and E, or 3, 5, 6. And using the 2nd scale fingering. And then we get D, E, G, or 5, 6 root. And we can play that here. And using the 2nd scale fingering. And then finally, E, G and A, or 6 root and 2nd, and using the 2nd scale fingering. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3-note fragments. And if I play them like that, it might be a sound that you've heard before. Of course, I'm playing them all in one direction, but you can also play these fragments in reverse too, and that's when things start getting really interesting. So when we start combining different fragments together and playing them ascending and in reverse, that's when they start sounding really interesting. Now I'm going to break the scale up into 4-note fragments. So again, starting from the root note, we've got G, A, B, D, or root 2nd, 3rd and 5th. We can also play that here or here. And using the 2nd scale fingering, moving on, we get A, B, D, E, or 2, 3, 5 and 6. Using the 2nd scale fingering. And moving on again, we get B, D, E and G, or 3, 5, 6 root. Using the 2nd scale fingering. Moving on again, D, E, G, A. Using the 2nd scale fingering. And finally, E, G, A, B, or 6 root 2nd and 3rd, using the 2nd scale fingering. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 4-note fragments, and again we can play those in reverse. Now the really interesting thing happens when we start combining 3 and 4-note fragments, playing them in different combinations and playing some ascending and some descending too. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a little play along with the track and try and use some 3 and 4-note clusters to show you what they sound like. So you can hear that combining the 3 and the 4-note clusters and the direction in which they're played produces some really great results. Now, what I'm not going to do is look at what I played in any detail, because there's a PDF of this lesson and everything that I'm playing is in that PDF, so make sure you grab it. But really quickly, I played a 4-note cluster, a 3-note cluster in reverse, and then another 3-note cluster. And the second time through, I played a 4-note cluster in reverse, a 3-note cluster, a 3-note cluster in reverse, and a 4-note cluster. What I'm going to do now is look at something different, and this time I'm going to play groups of 2 notes, and I'm going to play those 2 notes a fourth apart. So this is a fourth, and the good thing about this is there aren't many, and there aren't many variations. The other great thing about fourths is they add a different dimension and a different flavour to your bass lines, and also to improvise solos. So the first thing is going to be this, and I'm playing A to D or 2 to 5. We can also play that here or here. Then we've got B to E, which is 3 to 6, and we can play that here or up here. Then we've got D to G, which is 5 to root, and we can play that here or here. And then finally we've got E to A, which is 6 to 2, and we can play that here, or we can play that here, or we can play that here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 fragments in fourths. I'm going to have another playthrough now, but this time I'm going to be using some combinations and sequences in fourths. The last thing I'd like to look at is a little bit different. Now, certainly in the case of the 3 and 4 note clusters, they were linear sequences of the notes, but this time I'd like to look at something that's a little bit more angular, and I'm going to be playing 3 note clusters in an L shape. So I'm playing G, A and D, so I'm playing up and then across the strings. Now, you might look at this and think, well, you've played those notes as part of a 3 and 4 note cluster, so what's the point of doing this when we've played it? Well, the reason is that it will help you look at the scale in a different way. And because you're looking at the scale in a different way, you're likely to use that differently and play in a different way. It's also going to help you learn better. So we've got G, A and D, or root, second and fifth. We can play that up here. We can also play that here. Then we've got A, D and E, or 2, 5 and 6. We can play that here and here. Then we've got B, E and G, or 3, 6 and root. We can play that here and we can play it here. And we've got D, G and A, which is 5, root and second. We can play that here and play that here. And finally we've got E, A and B, 6, 2, 3. We can play it here, we can play it here, we can play it here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 L-shaped clusters now. So we've got 5 3-note clusters, we've got 5 4-note clusters, we've got 4 2-note clusters that are played in fourths, and now we've got 5 3-note L-shaped clusters, which is 19. And given that we can play them in reverse too, that's 38 combinations. And I'm sure that if you look at this really closely, you might even find 1 or 2 extra of your own. Don't forget to let me know in the comments below what you think of this lesson. It's always really nice to get some supportive, positive comments. So if you've got anything nice to say, please feel free to shout out. Don't forget to grab the PDF. It's got everything that I've spoken about and everything that I've played in it too. Feel free to give everything the thumbs up, support the channel by subscribing, or hit the bell notification. That way you won't miss out on what I'm releasing every week. Thanks for joining me. Look forward to seeing you again. And in the meantime, happy practicing.